YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, it's 8 o'clock and I'm Alistair Stewart. On the show tonight, politically astute or the master of procrastination? Boris Johnson postpones any decision on further COVID measures. The Education Secretary invites retired teachers to return to the chalk face. All hands to the pump, or a silly, even dangerous ploy. And we'll talk about the former police officer who's won his appeal after he was accused by his ex-colleagues of a non-crime hate incident. All of that coming up, but first a news update with Polly Middlehurst.
Alistair, thank you. Good evening. The Prime Minister says tougher COVID restrictions won't be introduced immediately, but the government isn't ruling out further action. Boris Johnson says the data is being monitored hourly and that arguments for stricter measures are very finely balanced. He's urging people to exercise caution over the Christmas period.
We agreed that we should keep the data from now on under constant review, keep following it hour by hour, and unfortunately, I must say to people, we will have to reserve the possibility of taking further action to protect the public and to protect public health, to protect our NHS.
An artist has been jailed for a minimum term of 36 years for the murder of Sir Richard Sutton and the attempted murder of his own mother, Anne Schreiber. Thomas Schreiber killed the multi-millionaire at his country estate in Dorset in April. Anne Schreiber, who was the 83-year-old's partner, was paralysed in the attack. Police read out a family statement outside the court.
We welcome the outcome of the trial and that justice is seen to be done. However, this was a tragic and devastating loss of life, taken far too early, of a generous, loving, elderly man who only wanted to enjoy his twilight years. An elderly man who was our father, a brother, a grandfather, and a friend to all who knew him.
The World Economic Forum has delayed its annual summit in Davos following concerns over the Omicron variant. The conference, held in the Swiss mountain resort, sees major political and business leaders from around the globe attending normally, but this year the meeting is going to be held in the early summer months. And the Premier League has opted against introducing a circuit breaker despite COVID outbreaks at a number of clubs. 6 of the weekend's 10 fixtures were postponed due to positive cases. And there had been suggestions that the round of games between December the 28th and the 30th might be called off. But at a shareholders' meeting, the league decided to go ahead with its schedule, with decisions to be made on a game-by-game basis. Her Majesty the Queen, though, has decided to celebrate Christmas at Windsor this year instead of going to Sandringham. It's the second year in a row for Her Majesty, who spent last Christmas at the Berkshire residence with her husband, who died in April. It's believed the head of state will take precautions and follow all the appropriate guidelines. Members of her family are also expected to visit her over the festive period. You're right up to date. Now back to Alistair Stewart.
So the Cabinet has decided not to decide. There will be no new restrictions on us yet. There certainly won't be any until after Christmas, unless. The PM said beady eyes would be kept on every twist and turn in the Omicron data, and his government will remain poised like greyhounds in the slip to act. But not yet, unless. Now, some are already suggesting it's a bit like St Augustine's mantra of make me virtuous, but not yet. Others, like Labour's Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, suggest it's an irresponsible delay to the inevitable. But many of us will breathe a sigh of relief that for now at least we can continue to plan for the family Christmases that we all want. Well, joining me now live in the studio is the man with his finger on the pulse and ear to the ground, GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. To be fair, a lot of the backdrop to all of this was questioning the data and the authority of the scientists, and it's been all over the place. 600 deaths, 6,000 deaths, 60,000 deaths as more. Is that what did for them?
Yeah, I think to a degree, the Prime Minister's argument today is we have to wait for the data, and we haven't got it yet. You're right, though, that is in contrast to what SAGE, the group of scientists, were suggesting over the weekend, who essentially said restrictions should be brought in and brought in now, if not yesterday. However, lots of Conservatives and others point to real-world data rather than the projections that SAGE have been dealing with from South Africa, which seems to suggest there has been this decoupling between the huge spike in cases they've seen with actually not a massive spike in hospitalisations or deaths. Now, in saying that, hospitalisations in London are up quite dramatically over the last week, up by over a third, though that's not represented around the rest of the country, though London does seem to be in the epicentre of this latest variant. So all in all, if we remove the politics, and I know we're going to get onto that, because politics is crucial, there is an argument the government can make. It's not ridiculous to say we haven't got the data yet to make this decision. And in essence, deciding not to do something is a decision in itself.
Absolutely. But it does mean to me, or it implies to me at least, that the politicians are back in charge.
Yeah, and I think that's a large degree. I think if this had been earlier on in the pandemic, the Prime Minister would have clearly gone back down that route of kind of, where we would have seen greater restrictions brought in, I think, earlier. I have to say, though, it is entirely possible, of course, that Boris Johnson would want to bring in restrictions at this stage, but is politically boxed in to the point where he frankly cannot, following that massive rebellion last week, when over 100 Conservative MPs rejected Plan B. This would go a hell of a lot longer or further than that. And, of course, Lord Frost's resignation at the weekend.
Well, as you know, we'll be talking to Sir John Redwood in a moment after this conversation. But what credit, and as I said at the beginning, you're the man with your finger on the pulse, ear to the ground. What were the camps? What were the divisions? Because we read that Michael Gove and Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary himself, were on one side, and that there was even a Cabinet Minister saying, you go the wrong way and I'm resigning.
Yeah, indeed. There are lots of suggestions that at least one Cabinet Minister might resign on this. We know that Grant Shapps, Kwasi Kwarteng, the Business Secretary, and Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, have been a lot more cautious about introducing restrictions. They know there'll be a bill to foot in terms of the cost for the Treasury, but also there will be, real cost implications for businesses up and down the country. And also, again, can the Prime Minister afford to cancel Christmas twice? That's clearly where we're at in terms of the thought process of within government. It's clearly an argument to be made within Cabinet. And frankly, they decided they cannot.
Yeah.
What that does mean, however, and you listen to the tone, not necessarily the words of the Prime Minister seem to be saying today, is that this time next week, we could really be looking at restrictions, that they're willing to let us have Christmas, but at the expense maybe of January.
Yeah. It plays to Wes Streeting's hand, who, in my view, is making a better fist of it at the moment, even than Sir Keir Starmer himself. Wes Streeting simply says, if you got it wrong, this is potentially fatal procrastination. It'll be on your head, Boris Johnson.
So this is the government's main dilemma. And there is no doubt, no matter who you are, this is a very difficult decision for the Prime Minister to make. essentially, he is right in saying that not all the data is there, and you can weigh these things up, though he is somewhat ignoring the senior scientists in this country who are suggesting things should be done now. The problem for the government is that potentially, when it may well be the right time, when the data's in to make the decision, it could be too late. Yeah. And that has always been the problem with this pandemic, is there is a lag between cases and hospitalisations and deaths. And Labour's main point is, yes, when we get that data, when we see how bad hospitalisations are, it will be too late.
Sure.
And that's the real concern for the government. But in the end, politically, Boris Johnson is in a position where right now he cannot make those decisions. And that is where I think probably the bigger criticism, us from the Labour Party, holds true, that maybe to a degree this decision by the Prime Minister and the Cabinet is not merely being made on public health grounds, but is also about Conservative Party management. And that could, and I say this, I repeat this, could have serious consequences for us all.
Darren, great to talk to you. Thank you for being in here with us live on the programme. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. So, what's been the reaction within the Conservative Party to today's news? I'm delighted now to be joined by Sir John Redwood, who was one of dozens of Tory MPs who voted against the introduction of vaccine passports last Tuesday. John, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. In your view, is this a wise decision, but as Darren was just saying, fraught with dangers?
I think it was the right decision. I and my colleagues are very swayed by the evidence. This isn't about politics. This is about a group of people desperately trying to draw on the best advice of all kinds and come to sensible judgments for the safety of people and for the prosperity of the country. And the evidence is not there. I mean, I received a very interesting answer to a parliamentary question I recently tabled. The answer came through today from the Vaccines Minister, speaking on behalf of the senior management of the department and the NHS. And I asked how many extra beds they were putting in or clearing to deal with the next wave of COVID, given the sage predictions of the fact that we might face a big wave. And the answer was they're not putting in any extra provision, because they don't believe the sage predictions, and she very clearly stated that they cannot yet say to us how quickly this might spread, whether the fast early introduction of Omicron would continue, or how serious the disease is going to be. And they need to await that evidence before they can undertake any sensible contingency planning and give better advice on what's going to happen. So it would have been quite wrong to have panicked into measures that we might not need when we have no idea yet, according to the experts, what's going to happen.
And to be clear on that, John, you're saying that's an NHS decision as much as a Department of Health and Social Care decision?
Well, of course. I mean, they couldn't take that decision without the advice or the actions of the NHS management, could they? I mean, they are the spokesmen and women for the NHS. That's what the Department of Health does. And that was clearly cleared with the senior management of the NHS. And the minister told me that they are not putting in extra bed capacity or clearing beds on their future workloads because they do not yet accept that we know what is likely to happen. I thought it was a very interesting and very honest answer.
Yes, I think it's an intriguing answer. Is this the political fight back from the Prime Minister that you were hoping for when you went into the opposition lobbies last week?
I don't think it's a political fight back. I think this is a grave national set of decisions that the government of the time has to make. And the Prime Minister was rightly acting as chairman. And as you've heard from your political advisor, I've heard these rumours as well through the media. There was a very good argument and debate within Cabinet with two different groups, one thinking that more needed to be done because they think this could be a very serious wave, and another group thinking it probably wasn't going to be so serious in terms of deaths and very serious illnesses, although there may be a lot of cases, and that we needed to think rather more about all the other things that can go wrong if you go in for more of a lockdown, people losing their businesses, people getting very depressed, more suicide, more problems, people keeping going. There's a cost to these measures as well as the possible payoff.
You didn't utter the words that it was the fight back that you were hoping for from Boris Johnson. Is that because you don't think it is?
I don't think this is about the future of the Prime Minister in this narrow...
By-election losses, ministers resigning, cornered, 100 of you voting against him?
It is a desperately important set of issues which have to be taken seriously by the people charged with these duties around the cabinet table. And I think that today was what they were wrestling with. I don't think they were wrestling with the detailed politics as their prime concern. I think their prime concern had to be, and I trust it was, the right answer for the nation. And the nation is divided on this, just as the experts are divided on this. And we're all having to wait because we've got great medical and scientific experts, but if you listen carefully to what they say underneath some of the spin, they are saying we don't know enough yet. And so that is why, perfectly rational thing to say, we've taken some precautions, people will take their own precautions if they wish. Let's get Christmas out of the way and we'll look at the data again. I think it's perfectly reasonable. And I trust it does mean we're going to get through Christmas now, because as we've been promised that Parliament would have to come back to discuss and debate any measures, we're running out of time to get Parliament back before Christmas to impose anything new. So I hope people can take that message away from it.
Let me drill briefly into something else that you have spoken about before, John. And Gus O'Donnell, a man we both know as a former cabinet secretary, but in a sense, more importantly, a former cabinet boss as well, has said that he is very concerned that no one seems to be, and I quote, modelling the economic and social impact of any further COVID measures. That's something that you're on the record of having raised weeks ago.
Well, I mean, throughout the long pandemic crisis so far, I've said that I'm not very keen on having ministers flanked by experts in a press conference. I think ministers take the best advice from their advisors and then come to judgments and explain the judgments to the public. But if they're going to have experts as co-presenters, I don't just want the chief scientist or the chief medical officer there. I want the chief economist or the chief business representative or whatever from the civil service as well, because they have a legitimate point of view, which needs to be weighed in the balance when making these very difficult judgments.
Finally, John, were the data to swing back, and you're more than entitled to say, oh, that's a theoretical, hypothetical question, but it may do, and therefore I'd like your advice and guidance to our viewers on this. If it were to swing back, are there now some no-go areas for the government to pursue, even in the likelihood of there being an increase in infections leading to further hospitalisations and the rest of it?
Well, I think if there were pretty convincing evidence, not just hospitalisations, but serious illnesses leading to intensive care and possible death, none of us want that. The judgments we made in the last couple of weeks assume we're not going to see that getting out of control in the way we did in the first wave, because of vaccines and because of drugs and so forth. If there was evidence of that, then yes, we would want the government to come forward with a menu of options or with their own choices of how you could reduce the danger of that. But they still have to weigh into the balance other things, because you can't have such a severe set of changes that the lights go out because people aren't allowed to work in the power station, or that the food isn't in the supermarkets because not enough food workers and transport workers can work. So there always has to be some kind of balance, taking into account the fact that the economic variable isn't just about people making a bit of money, it's actually making sure that all the other essential things we need, food, light, heat, lodging and all the rest of it, are still available, because otherwise we'd have all sorts of other health issues.
Sir John Redwood, great to talk to you always. Thank you very much indeed for finding time for us this evening. Thank you. Sir John Redwood there with his views, and just a reminder that he was a rebel last week on the issues specifically of vaccination passports, his views on the decision by the Cabinet just a few hours ago to take no further action yet. Let's now get the view of a scientific advisory group member, SAGE. They're looking after the government, giving them guidance, and today it was considered and it was not acted upon. Let's find out what Professor Paul Moss from the Institute of Immunology and Immunotherapy at the University of Birmingham thinks about that. And as I say, he himself is a member of SAGE. Good of you to join us. Do you welcome the Cabinet's decision, or do you think it's a dangerous delay?
Thanks for being with you, Alistair. It's nice to join you tonight. I probably should just say I'm not a regular member of SAGE. I have attended it, but I haven't been at the last few meetings, so it gives me a bit more freedom to talk, perhaps. I think, in answer to your question, as Boris Johnson said, this is finely balanced, extremely difficult decision, and I recognise the points from Sir John Redwood there about economics justifying. It has to be considered in account with the health systems. I mean, what the Prime Minister talked about was the influence of the boosters, the hospitalization rates, and the severity of this virus. And those are three factors that we need to keep an eye on day by day, and something that perhaps we could discuss in the next few minutes.
Well, I think that's at the heart of it, and we'll go straight there, because you've made the point that you think we are perhaps in a better place than some of the pessimists think we are, because of so many of us have had it, therefore we have a natural immunity. Most of us have had 2 jabs, many of us have had 3, so that's absolutely fine. But the criticism that Sir John made, and from what we gather within the cabinet as well, is actually the quality of the predictive data coming from your colleagues who are full-time members of SAGE. The scientists have lost the plot.
I don't think that's probably fair, Alistair. I mean, I think it's great in this country that we have such open debate, and our science has been excellent in the last 18 months, as you know, with the vaccines and the drugs and so forth. Modelling is always difficult, and it's very difficult to predict how things go. And I think if you look back in the last 20 months, some of the predictions have turned out to probably be accurate and some less so. But I think we just need to realise that they're never perfect and making a balanced assessment on what they're saying. I mean, if you look at some of the data that we're now seeing, yes, hospitalizations probably up 30%, as your colleague said, but just a hint that perhaps in the last 3 days, those are starting to level off a little bit. So we are seeing some gently encouraging data coming through.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for that, and so was Darren, talking about it earlier. But here's the problem, and it's a little bit like members of Parliament and members of the government saying, you may not do this, and then being photographed doing it. If you've got scientists who are looking at the same data and all have brilliant qualifications, PhDs, professorships, and the rest of it, and some of them can say, oh, maybe 6,000 deaths. Some of them can say, oh, maybe 60,000 deaths. Some of them can say maybe 500,000 deaths. And the same body of people said 2 years ago, well, 25,000 deaths would be a good outcome. How can the public have any credibility in this eminent group of men and women advising our government?
I think it's a very fair question, Alistair. But I mean, I think we do have very good scientific advice and good modelling advice. It is so difficult to predict the future, particularly here where we've got so many variables. We've seen data from South Africa, as you talked about. The Omicron wave seems to peak there already and is on the way down. How do we translate that into a very different society in the UK? And these are just one example of the factor we're wrestling with, and whether this wave will go into older populations who may be more susceptible or not. So these are just some variables which are very complex with predictions, and that's why you often get this wide range of predictions.
2 final questions, if I may, Paul. One, how long do you believe, as a scientist, have we got before we know that we're through the worst?
I think, Alistair, I don't want to cop out, but I think day by day is reasonable. As I say, in South Africa, they've probably had this now 5 or 6 weeks. The numbers seem to have peaked. The death rates are stable, slightly up perhaps in the last few days, but still much lower than the summer. So that's encouraging. As I say, the hospitalizations perhaps are a little bit encouraging here, but it's still very early days, and we're seeing doubling rates of every 2 days. I think by next week we will know a lot more. But we really do have to take this day by day, and indeed those were the words of the Prime Minister today.
Absolutely right, and that's where I will finish, if I may. The Prime Minister says that the Cabinet is keeping a close eye on all of the data and is not ruling out any of the options should it turn bad. Let us both hope and pray, as John Redwood did, that it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, here's the final question, Paul. How short a period of notice could there be to make that effective? Because Labour are saying it's dangerous procrastination. If you make that decision on the 28th, 29th or 30th of December, it could be too late.
I think the British public are very, scientifically literate. That they know that if you lock down earlier, you will have a greater effect. The sooner you do something, the more effect you will have, but of course the greater economic and side effects as well. So that is the debate. I think, if the data turns bad, then I'm sure that the Prime Minister and the Cabinet will act very quickly, and the public will accept that, as long as you said, as the data is there for them to see.
Professor Paul Moss, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us again on GB News. So there you have the preeminent views of a leading politician and a leading scientist. The right decision, it looks, was taken today. But heads up, eyes open, all alert, keeping an eye on the data and be ready to make a move. But I finally re-quote to you what Professor Paul Moss said there. It's looking good, and it's looking better than some of the gainsayers have been saying for perhaps a little too long. After the break, we will be talking about the government's plan to use retired teachers to cover for staff shortages caused by COVID. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. We keep a lot of cloud in the sky, I think, during the next 24 hours, but by the start of Tuesday, there is an increasing chance of cloud breaks in some places, leading to a frosty start, but a good chance of sunshine by the afternoon. Here's the area of high pressure that's been keeping us dry, settled, but also mostly cloudy during the last few days. Now, during Monday, some slightly less moist air drifted in from the east, and that's led to those cloud bases lifting a touch and a better chance of breaks developing within the cloud. But these breaks are always quite tenuous and difficult to pinpoint, so a good chance across central and western parts of the country that we'll start off with those cloud breaks and a touch of frost in places on Tuesday morning. But in general, we keep a lot of cloud, I think, particularly in the east and in the south. And again, we'll see a lot of that cloud drift around during Tuesday itself. But you can see some reasonable cloud breaks and sunshine developing during the afternoon across parts of central and western England into Wales, western Scotland as well. A pleasant enough day where we get some sunshine coming through at last. Otherwise, mostly it's cloudy and it's feeling cold, 5, 6, 7 Celsius, about as high as those temperatures will get. And then with the chance of those more extensive cloud breaks by the end of Tuesday, we go into the start of Wednesday with the fairly widespread frost, I think, across Scotland, England and Wales, particularly away from towns and cities, temperatures dipping a degree or so below freezing. But for Northern Ireland, it's milder as cloud rolls in here and the first signs of a change on the way midweek. Outbreaks of rain, a wet start for Northern Ireland, and then those outbreaks of rain pushing into southwestern Scotland by the afternoon, as well as Wales and southwest England. Some heavy rain for a time, and that moves into the colder air further east. So there's the chance of some snow on the tops of the Pennines and Scottish mountains, but it turns milder and wetter in the south.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is The Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Among the most powerless victims of the last 2 years of the coronavirus have been children. Few have become seriously ill, though many have tested positive. For them, the suffering's been different. It's been a disrupted education with make-do lessons and online learning and not seeing their friends. For their parents, there's been the worry and the disruption of their own working lives as issues such as childcare come into play and the not knowing when a whole bubble might be sent home just because one child has tested positive. In the longer term, the great and the good of the education world have hatched catch-up plans, begged for big bucks, banked some of the better make-do measures for future use, and lots more besides. But today comes a fresh call from the Education Secretary to hire retired teachers, a call to arms to return to the chalk face to help out. Now, when I read that, on the face of it, it seemed to me sound. Now is the time for all good men and women to come to the aid of the country. But on closer examination, it's flawed and has caused a storm of protest among the teaching profession. Many make the point that had the government prioritised school staff on vaccinations and boosters in the first place, this would be much less of an issue. But that, of course, is history. They also ask, more poignantly, why staff were not automatically boosted when teams went into schools to jab kids. Schools, therefore, remain places of relative danger, especially for older, vulnerable folk, like retired teachers. Why would one put them in the line of fire? If, however, they do take up the challenge, what will they be paid? A supply teacher's rate? A salary equivalent? And what impact will all of that have on their pensions? Will they still be subject to disclosure and barring service checks just to make sure that they are safe? Will they be waived, risky, or speeded up? And to be blunt, if they've been out of the classroom for more than 6 months, a year, or even longer, who's going to bring them back up to speed? If quality of education is the ambition, rather than just keeping an eye on the little darlings while teachers off sick, then they need training up. And on the quality of education, will Ofsted suspend inspections or just miss out the babysat classes? As one ex-head teacher said, when I was a head, there's no way that I would want an inspector going into a class being taught by someone who'd left teaching 5 years ago, who I don't know and have not interviewed or seen teach anywhere near my kids, let alone to be watched by an Ofsted inspector. So who will guard these guardians invited to flood back? Will heads interview them, see them teach? Will they have time? What's more, how about the much-vaunted tutoring programme? Has it been in action? Has it achieved targets? Who is checking on that? It seems to me that we may be approaching the end of term with a half-baked idea to raise spirits ahead of next term and the second anniversary of this health nightmare. With Omicron fast taking a firm grip, come January 2022, we face the prospects of having schools riddled again with COVID, underfunded and understaffed, asking the oldest and most vulnerable to take the risk for the rest. Perhaps focusing on getting school staff boosted, schools made safer, children vaccinated and boosted so that fewer permanent staff fall ill might be a better plan. Ministers and officials have a little time to get it right. Children, however, only get one go at education, and the last 2 years are, to a greater or less extent, already missing in action. Let's not make it worse with an unhealthy and ill-conceived plan. Well, to discuss that, I'm joined now by the education consultant and former head teacher, Barry Smith. Barry, am I wrong with that analysis? I based it essentially on my reaction as a parent, but also on what I was reading from so many teachers and educationalists.
Well, I can't see really any reason why retired teachers would want to come back. They left teaching for a reason. They'd worked in the profession for as long as they wanted to, or possibly they retired early. Teachers often talk about retiring early if they can. If you go back into a school, you raised the point about their salaries as well. About 125 quid a day they get. Whether that's enough to reel them in back into school, I don't know. And when you're a supply teacher, often you arrive 8:30 in the morning, you don't know the building, you don't know the school, you don't know your colleagues, you don't know the SLT, the senior leadership team. You could be pushed in period 1, your maths, period 2, your history, period 3, your French. You might be an art teacher. You're standing there in front of a group of kids that you don't know, and that group of kids are probably all wearing masks. So you don't know the behaviour systems in the school. The implications of all of that, I wouldn't want to do it. I would not volunteer to do it in a million years.
I hear all of that, and it echoes what I'd picked up elsewhere. But if it wasn't just for a day, if it was somebody who retired relatively recently and was still up to steam, and we may talk about that in a moment, and they came back to join the team, then that makes sense. It's the idea of just popping in babysitter-like that strikes me as being crazy.
Well, if you go back to your school that you know and you know the staff, and that's very isolating. Can you imagine that? You arrive there, you don't know any colleagues, you don't know any senior leadership team, you don't know the kids, you don't know the systems. So you feel incredibly isolated in that circumstance. So it will be essentially babysitting, isn't it? It's the government again thinking, okay, we must be seen to do something. We must do something to work on our PR. And let's face it, they've got a huge PR mountain to climb there. Lesson after lesson, your news story, breaking, the photographs now of the garden in 10 Downing Street and so on. When these appeals had been made for teachers to come back to the classroom, to the chalk face on Twitter and so forth, it's met with derision, really, from what I can see. It's a bit of a joke. There's no way in the world you're going to get enough teachers to make a difference. And even if you did get enough teachers to come forward and volunteer, they're not in a position where they can really teach with any efficacy. I think it's a PR exercise.
And do you share the views of those who've expressed it so widely that there are serious health issues here? Not so much for the children, but ironically for perhaps elderly men and women who are tempted to come back into the trade, who are still perhaps in the most vulnerable age group.
Well, they're in a more vulnerable age group, aren't they? They're over 55, I can't see many people over 65 coming back, but yeah, they're in a more vulnerable age group. Yeah, of course they are.
The other issue that was raised with me very forcibly was this issue of the tests that are done to make sure that someone has behaved themselves and not gone off the rails at some juncture. You've read what Nadeem Zahawi said, and you've talked about it, I know, to colleagues, but is that nailed down? Is that watertight, that they will still have to have been given the big tick on the DBS front?
Well, again, the DFE, if you look at their website, they're saying they're going to fast-track all of those. Is very much they're encouraging people to apply now, get on that register now, make sure you can come back in January. We want you back, we'll fast-track your DBS, is what they're claiming. Again, they're going to have to be very, very careful on that. Look, again, it's another PR issue, potentially another PR disaster, potentially, isn't it, if they don't get that right. But as I say, I don't think they're going to be deluged with lots of teachers in their late 50s, early 60s wanting to come back to school.
Sure. Let's finish, because I don't want to appear as that's all just a daft idea. I mean, it genuinely worried me, and as I said, I followed what a lot of people said, and I've spoken to one or two people I know quite well in the trade who echoed those views. But let's finish on an optimistic note. If Nadeem Zahawi or one of his top officials phoned you up now and said, look, we have got this problem, there are teachers who are poorly, and there are those who have left the trade, we need more, and it's urgent, what would your prescription be?
I'd be telling them to make a decision now. I'll be saying extend the Christmas break so in theory, schools are going back on the 4th of January. I would say to everybody now, OK, we're going to give teachers time in school from the 4th of January, the rest of that week without any kids, lots of planning, lots of preparation. All the kids come back on the 6th of January. That would be a great PR coup for the government if they did that. I would say to make a decision now. We are stopping inspections indefinitely. Again, you'd win a lot of friends in education there. I'd also try and move forward with some clarity on exams. Everybody's terrified about exams. At a push, you could even argue, okay, we're going to go to 1 day a week where we'll do online teaching. Again, you'd win lots of friends in education there, I suspect. And then that could all be reviewed, in 6 weeks' time, sort of mid-February when it's half term again. There's a lot of work to be done on winning the public back because, quite frankly, people are embarrassed by the state of the government.
Yeah. And postscript to that, online learning, I bigged up in my introduction because I do know, having spoken to all sorts of people like you, but even Robert Halfon, chair of the Education Select Committee, that online learning was a new discovery for some people. But hey, it actually can work, and it's a positive.
It's not great. It's not great.
But it can help. But it can add to, and it can widen out. It's like, we're not going to replace all PE teachers with Joe Wicks clones, but it helped at the time.
It helped at the time, and we're between a rock and a hard place. So we'll do what we've got to do to get through this.
All right, Barry, great to talk to you. Thanks. No, I accept that, and thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts on that. Barry Smith, former head teacher and education consultant. As I say, the whole purpose of that item, apart from my expressing my views in what we call the monologue, that long introduction, is not to say, it's just another daft idea. It's up to the guests if they want to say things like that. It's to say, here's an idea, let's test it, let's try and probe some of the shortfalls, and then at the end come up with what might just prove to be some better ideas as well. And if the Ofsted people stop doing inspections and their inspectors become teachers again, hey, there's a good idea. After the break, we'll be looking at how artificial intelligence, AI, could help in the fight against dementia.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, Oxford professor and infectious disease specialist Sunitra Gupta reveals why the powers that be have got Omicron so wrong. Should you have that difficult conversation about COVID with your family over the festive season? Model and supporter of the Together Declaration Against Vaccine Passports, Leilani Daldeen, went viral after doing just that. She'll be here with me live. Plus, positive Professor Carol Sikora and GBNews star Neil Oliver will deliver a much-needed dose of reason and optimism. And I'll break down the stories of the day with my superstar panel, which includes senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
according to the latest figures, there are over 55 million people worldwide living with dementia. Without a cure, this diagnosis can often be devastating, and early detection's crucial for prolonging the life of dementia patients and, wherever possible, improving the quality of that life. However, a recent study by the University of Exeter has shown that artificial intelligence can now predict which people will develop dementia within 2 years with 92% accuracy. This study was funded by Dementia Research UK, and experts hope that these findings will help to revolutionise the diagnostic process. Well, joining me now is Dr. Laura Phipps from Alzheimer's Research UK, and there she is. Laura, good of you to join us. Thank you very much indeed. As I mentioned there, millions of people worldwide are suffering with dementia. Is there ever potential to reverse or at least improve some of the symptoms associated with dementia?
Yeah, absolutely. So dementia is caused by a number of different diseases, brain diseases. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common. And there are treatments available today that can help some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. But what people who have the condition and their families really need is life-changing treatments. So treatments that will slow or stop the progress of this disease. Now, we don't have those at the moment, but research is really making progress, and we hope that within the next 5-10 years, there will be really big treatment advances that can improve people's lives.
So that, in a sense, that's brutally honest, because someone like me, in my the age that I am, 69, here I am, hopefully still relatively active and what have you. Along comes this piece of research, and it may say, well, you're going to get it in a couple of weeks' time. But when I was 35 or 40, it might have predicted that you will get it within the next 22 years or something. It's not great news, but it's predictive and preparedness news.
So the research that's come out recently about artificial intelligence, what that's done is it's looked at people who are later in life, so people who are in their early 70s, who already have problems with their memory, so they're already going to seek a doctor's help to understand if they might have a problem. And the challenge there is to help doctors work out, of those people who think there's something wrong, which of them are likely to go on to develop dementia, and which of those perhaps have another condition, or it's a natural part of aging and they're worrying when perhaps they don't need to. And that's what this technology has really been able to show benefit for, in helping doctors to make a more accurate judgment about, of those people who come to them with memory problems, who are really those people at higher risk of going on to develop dementia. And that's really, I think, where the critical value comes, in helping doctors within the clinics that already exist today and the patients that they already see, making more accurate judgments and being able to reassure people with more certainty about what the future might hold for them.
Absolutely spot on, and thank you for that clarity. A friend of mine tweeted when he knew that we were going to be having this conversation, and his father suffered with Alzheimer's, and he says it's a real dilemma. If I knew for certain that I was going to end up like my father did, I'd probably want to end my own life. But here's the key point. I wouldn't know what form of diagnosis and what form of dementia I was likely to get, because everybody's dementia is different. So this may be a predictive tool. Can it be a specifically predictive tool as well?
So it should be able to give people more accuracy about the fact that they may go on to develop dementia. There are other tools then that it would help a doctor to use to help a doctor see, okay, well, this person might be at high risk, so perhaps they should have this type of brain scan or this type of memory test that would help a doctor to work out what type of dementia somebody might have. And those tests that doctors have to use in their armory are improving, and they're improving thanks to research. So the situation now compared to when your friends, relatives had dementia is quite different in terms of research advancing, doctors being able to have more specific tools to help people understand the form of dementia that they have. And actually, with all of these advances in research, it helps doctors and it helps researchers to get closer to understanding these diseases. And it's those advances that we're making through research, and charities like Alzheimer's Research UK, we're funding every day these type of advances that will allow us to bring through the next generation of treatments that can change lives and remove that very negative outlook that people have about the condition, because there is hope. We've seen hope come through research into COVID, into research into cancer, and we'll make those same breakthroughs for people with dementia again. But to be able to do it, we need to understand the disease, identify those people early, and really boost the amount of research that we can fund.
And it's brilliant that you do that, because I know people donate money to all sorts of charities, including yours, not just because you're nice, cuddly people, but because it is a sharply focused scientific effort to make lives better. When you spoke to those brilliant people, it was Exeter University, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, this research was done in Exeter, yeah.
Yeah, and you got the debrief, as it were. Did you get any sense from them that with this AI work that they were doing, that they were also looking at other ailments, mystery challenges, mental well-being, mental health challenges as well, where AI could say, yep, we can spot the signs for that as well?
So, yeah, I mean, this research is done at the University of Exeter, and a number of the academics working there are also working at the Alan Turing Institute. There's huge amounts of research ongoing, not only there, but across the UK and across the world, to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to advance healthcare across a whole range of areas. And we know this has already been used in areas like cancer. I mean, artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's used every day in our day-to-day lives, from serving as ads on social media to help us decide what types of film we might want to watch. So, it's great that these advances are being used now for healthcare. And I think over the next few years, we'll see a real increase in the amount of kind of applications of this machine learning technology to help doctors make more accurate and more confident clinical judgments about a range of aspects of our health.
Laura Phipps, a great pleasure to talk to you. Hurrah for the Alzheimer's research charity, hurrah for Exeter University, and hurrah for humanity. Thank you very much indeed for sharing those thoughts with us. Brilliant. Clever people doing clever things. And finally, as they say in some quarters, it is time for Culture Clash. And today I'm delighted to say that we're going to look at a case where a former police officer has won a legal challenge against a policy which records gender-critical expressions as non-crime incidents. Seems strange to me, surely, that something is either a crime or it isn't. And I'm delighted to say that my very good friend Andrew is with me this evening. Is that my naivety, or is this going on the whole time and this copper took a stand?
Yes, a lot of people don't realise it's going on. I mean, to give you an example of the extent, in a 5-year period between 2014 and 2019, there were 120,000 recorded incidents of non-crime hate incidents that were recorded by the police in England and Wales. It's an awful lot. They're spending an awful lot of time on this. It just so happens that a couple of years ago, they visited Harry Miller, who's an ex-police officer himself and an entrepreneur, and said that because he had retweeted an offensive poem, this was classified as a non-crime hate incident. They had to investigate. They sort of tackled with the wrong guy, because he knows about the police force, and of course he took a stand, exactly that. So most people just sort of let it go. And the problem with these non-crime hate incidents, they're recorded against your name without your knowledge. They can show up on a disclosure and barring service check, so you might lose work. It's actually quite serious.
But the other thing which I found extraordinary reading it up, which again made my nostrils flare and what have you, it's the language, as it so often is when we discuss these things. Non-hate crime, blah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either against the law or it's not. And Harry brilliantly argued, said, there is no law against being offensive. I may offend you, but that's tough.
Exactly.
There is a line that you can cross and become a criminal. He was nowhere near that.
No, well, when the police officer said to him, kept referring to the victim, he said, but how can there be a victim when there hasn't been a crime? And what's really reassuring about this is now that it's gone to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal, and this was in association with the Free Speech Union, with Toby Young and Harry Miller's group, which is called Fair Cop, and they took this all the way to the Court of Appeal, and it has now been ruled, the judge made the statement clearly, that the recording, I've got it written here, the recording of non-crime hate incidents is plainly an interference with freedom of expression. Where all this comes from, actually, is from the College of Policing guidelines. This is actually the case has been against the College of Policing, because they've been telling police, you need to record non-crime hate incidents. And even worse, there doesn't need to be any evidence of hate for you to record it as a non-crime hate incident. The key determining factor, in fact, is perception of the victim. So to explain that, if someone said something to me that's a bit nasty, I could interpret that and say, oh, well, I think they did that because I'm gay, and I therefore think it's a hate crime against a protected characteristic. I phone the police. They don't have to look into it. They don't need to have any evidence. They just have to take my word, and it is recorded as a non-crime hate incident against that person. That's the situation. A lot of people don't realise this is going on. Yeah. The problem that I saw the College of Policing response to this today on their website. It looks very much like that they want to carry on with the practice of non-crime hate incidents, and they seem to be under the belief that they can just slightly modify their guidelines and still do it.
That potentially they are in for a huge shock because, as you and I know, but let's because many out there will know it as well. But let's make it crystal clear. You can pass a law that says don't do this anymore, or you can have case law. The appeal court has said this does not stand. In effect, that becomes the law and protects future Harrys.
Yes, and I'm fairly confident that even if the College of Policing think they can continue to do this, they're in for a bit of a shock. I think you're absolutely right. It's not going to happen. I think this is an absolutely landmark case. It's really going to help pull us out of this illiberalism that has been infecting our law enforcement agencies. It's really important that the police are not there to monitor what we think and the things that we say. That is not their role. And as you said, language can be a means to commit a crime through harassment, say, or things like, or libel or what. That's not what's going on here. These are people who are causing offence, whether they intended to or not. I mean, this is the absolute key thing. But even if you intend to cause offence, that's still an aspect of free speech that we have to accept in a free society. So I'm really thrilled that the decision went this way. I just think there's still going to be a bit of a struggle to have it implemented. I mean, if in April of this year, Priti Patel did instruct the College of Policing to stop instructing police to record non-crime hate incidents, and they just haven't done it. They've just, as far as I can see, they've just ignored her request. It wasn't a request, it was an instruction, but it hasn't happened. So you see, there's still struggles that are going to go on.
You have 30 seconds, slightly less, to predict whether Priti Patel, Home Secretary, will say, hang on a minute, I'm not having this.
Well, I assume that she definitely will. I mean, that's in her nature, isn't it? She doesn't take no for an answer. I would have thought so. I think the non-crime hate incident is over, ultimately. There will be a bit of a fight, but I think it will eventually go.
Fascinating, with great elucidation. Andrew Doyle, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's it from me. Coming up at 9 o'clock is Dan Wootton, but let's bring you up to date, first of all, with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. We keep a lot of cloud in the sky, I think, during the next 24 hours, but by the start of Tuesday, there is an increasing chance of cloud breaks in some places, leading to a frosty start, but a good chance of sunshine by the afternoon. Here's the area of high pressure that's been keeping us dry, settled, but also mostly cloudy during the last few days. Now, during Monday, some slightly less moist air drifted in from the east, and that's led to those cloud bases lifting a touch and a better chance of breaks developing within the cloud. But these breaks are always quite tenuous and difficult to pinpoint, so a good chance across central and western parts of the country that we'll start off with those cloud breaks and a touch of frost in places on Tuesday morning. But in general, we keep a lot of cloud, I think, particularly in the east and in the south. And again, we'll see a lot of that cloud drift around during Tuesday itself. But you can see some reasonable cloud breaks and sunshine developing during the afternoon across parts of central and western England into Wales, western Scotland as well. A pleasant enough day where we get some sunshine coming through at last. Otherwise, mostly it's cloudy and it's feeling cold, 5, 6, 7 Celsius, about as high as those temperatures will get. And then, with the chance of those more extensive cloud breaks by the end of Tuesday, we go into the start of Wednesday with the fairly widespread frost, I think, across Scotland, England and Wales, particularly away from towns and cities, temperatures dipping a degree or so below freezing. But for Northern Ireland, it's milder as cloud rolls in here and the first signs of a change on the way midweek. Outbreaks of rain, a wet start for Northern Ireland, and then those outbreaks of rain pushing into southwestern Scotland by the afternoon, as well as Wales and southwest England. Some heavy rain for a time, and that moves into the colder air further east. So there's the chance of some snow on the tops of the Pennines and Scottish mountains, but it turns milder and wetter in the south.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email